She said it the morning after, standing in the gray light of a kitchen that smelled like wood smoke and pine resin. Her back turned to me while she poured water into a pot she didn't need to fill. "Don't tell my husband about last night." 7 words. She didn't look at me when she said them. Didn't need to. The weight of them landed like a stone dropped into still water, and the ripples just kept going. I hadn't planned any of it. I hadn't planned to stop at the Danner homestead at all. It was 3 days before Christmas, and the Wyoming plains had been working themselves into a fury since mid-morning. I'd been riding south toward Casper, picking up a job delivering horses to a rancher down that way. Nothing remarkable. Nothing I hadn't done a dozen times before. My name is Cole Merritt, and if there's one thing a man like me learns early, it's how to read the sky. By early afternoon, that sky was telling me things I didn't want to hear. The clouds had rolled in from the northwest, like a gray wall moving across the earth, low and dense, and carrying the particular silence that only comes before a blizzard. Not snow, a blizzard. There's a difference a prairie man knows in his bones. I'd pushed the horse harder than I should have, trying to reach a way station I'd passed through 2 years prior. But the storm outran me. By the time the first real wave of snow hit, I couldn't see 10 feet in front of my face. Wind like a blade. Cold that didn't ask permission. It just got inside you and sat there. My horse, a dun gelding named Hatch, was starting to walk sideways into the gust, which is what horses do when they're frightened and running out of sense. I didn't blame him. I was doing something similar. Then I saw the light. It was faint, orange, flickering. The kind of light that comes from a window when every other thing in the world has gone white and dark and howling. I turned Hatch toward it and rode the last quarter mile with my head down and my hat pulled so low I was riding half blind. When I came up on the fence line, I almost didn't see it until Hatch stopped dead. Smart animal. I got down, led him along the fence until I found the gate, and pushed through into a yard I could barely make out in the storm. A barn loomed to my left. A house, 2 lit windows to my right. I got Hatch into the barn first. That's the way a man who knows horses does things. I found a stall, got him out of the wind, pulled his saddle, and rubbed him down with a piece of sacking I found hanging on a post. My fingers were numb by then. I could hear the storm screaming outside the barn doors, could feel it in the way the whole structure groaned and shuddered. Then I heard the door behind me. I turned around, and she was standing there in the entrance of the barn. One hand gripping the doorframe, lantern raised in the other, amber light falling across her face and the snow swirling behind her like something from a dream. Auburn hair whipping loose from its braid. Green wool dress. Eyes wide and wary, and something else I couldn't name yet. "There's a man in my barn," she said, to no one in particular. "Yes, ma'am," I said, and I apologize for it." She looked at me for a long moment, the way a woman looks when she's deciding something quickly and wants to get it right. Then she looked at Hatch, who had his nose over the stall door and was watching her with the mournful, hopeful expression horses put on when they want grain. "You both look half frozen," she said. "I'll get the horse some feed. You come inside." If you're new here, welcome. We tell stories of the Old West, of the kind of nights that change a man forever. Subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments, what city are you watching from? We'll leave you a heart. Now let's keep going. Her name was Eliza Danner, and she told me that much before she told me anything else. The house was small, but kept with care. A main room with a stone fireplace going strong, a kitchen corner, a table with 4 chairs that looked like 3 of them had never been used, a rag rug on the plank floor, a quilt on a rocking chair. The kind of home a woman builds with her hands when the man she shares it with is too busy or too tired to notice the details. She set a bowl of stew in front of me before I'd even finished pulling off my coat, and I ate it without saying much because a man who's been cold and hungry for 6 hours doesn't waste time on conversation. She sat across the table with her hands wrapped around a tin cup and watched me eat with a patience that felt like habit, like she'd learned long ago to sit quietly and wait for things to come to her. "Your husband home?" I asked, when I'd gotten through most of the bowl. She was quiet for just a beat too long. "He rode out this morning for Gillette, but business with a feed supplier." She looked at the window, where the storm was pressing hard against the glass. "He was supposed to be back by nightfall." I didn't say what we were both thinking. A man didn't ride home through a storm like that. Not if he had any sense. "You got neighbors nearby?" I asked. She shook her head. "Nearest homestead is the Callaway place, 7 miles east." Another pause. Storm came in faster than anyone expected. I nodded and said nothing. There was nothing to say that would make the arithmetic of the situation different. She was alone. I was stranded. The storm outside was one of those Wyoming killers that didn't care about the plans of people. We were going to be in that house until it passed, and there was nothing to be done about it. "There's a cot in the back room," she said. "Storage mostly, but there's a cot. You're welcome to it." "Much obliged," I said. "I won't be any trouble, ma'am." She looked at me then. Really looked. The way she'd looked in the barn. That quick and careful assessment. "You don't look like trouble," she said. Then, quietly, almost to herself, "Most trouble doesn't." I didn't ask what she meant by that. I reckon I already had an idea. The storm got worse after midnight. I know because I wasn't sleeping. I was lying on that cot in the back room, listening to the wind tear at the eaves of the house, thinking about the road I'd been on when the sky turned on me, and wondering, as I sometimes did on long, solitary nights, whether the road itself had been trying to tell me something. A man who drifts long enough starts to think about things like that. Why starts to wonder if there's a reason he ends up in certain places, with certain people, at certain times. I heard movement in the kitchen. Low, careful footsteps. Then the creak of the fire being stoked. I got up, put on my boots and my vest, and went out. She was kneeling in front of the fireplace, feeding it another piece of split wood, and she looked up when she heard me without startling, like she'd expected I might come. Her hair was fully down now, loose over her shoulders, that deep auburn catching the firelight in a way that made it look like it was burning too. She'd changed into a heavier robe over her dress, and she held herself with the particular stillness of a person who has been awake a long time and has stopped fighting it. "Couldn't sleep either," she said. It wasn't a question. "Loud storm," I said. "Yes." She sat back from the fire and pulled her knees up, wrapped her arms around them. The firelight moved over her face. "I keep thinking I hear horses on the road." I didn't say anything to that. The road was invisible under 2 feet of snow by now, and any sound coming from outside was just the storm reshaping the world. But a woman waiting for a husband to come home hears what she needs to hear, even when there's nothing there. I pulled one of the kitchen chairs close to the fire, not too close to where she sat, a respectful distance, and sat down. She didn't tell me to go back to bed. We sat in silence for a while, and it was the kind of silence that 2 strangers can fall into when the world outside has gotten so big and cold that the small warmth of another person's presence becomes something neither of them wants to give up. After a time, she said, "Where are you headed?" "Before the storm." Casper, I said. Horse delivery. You're a drifter, she said. Not unkind, just accurate. I reckon that's a fair word for it. She nodded slowly, looking at the fire. I used to think people who moved like that were running from something. Some are, I said. And you? I don't think I'm running, I said. I think I just never found the place worth stopping for. Something in her face shifted, subtle, like a door that moves a quarter inch in a breeze. I stopped, she said. I stopped here. She was quiet a moment. Sometimes I wonder if I stopped too soon. I didn't push her on it. A man learns, if he has any sense, that some things a woman says in the dark by a fire are meant to dissolve into the room, not to be caught and examined. She wasn't asking me to fix anything. She was just saying it out loud for the first time. We sat there talking until the fire burned down to steady coals. Careful at first, then less careful, then hardly careful at all. She told me about coming west from Ohio at 19, newly married to Harlan, full of the kind of hope the young carry before they know the lantern is running low on oil. I told her about Missouri, about the war that took my father, about riding out alone at 22 and never quite stopping. Harlan's a good man, she said at one point. And the way she said it, measured, firm, like something she'd decided to believe, told me more than silence would have. At some point, we had moved from the courtesy of strangers to something that felt like kinship. Not romance. Not yet. Just the recognition of another person who carried something heavy and had gotten used to carrying it alone. It was past 2 in the morning when she finally said she ought to try to sleep. Me too, I said. She stood, and I stood, and for a moment we were both standing in the orange glow of the low fire, closer than we'd been all evening. She looked up at me with those amber eyes, and there was something in them, not invitation, not exactly. More like honesty. The kind a person can't help. When the dark and the cold and the late hour have worn away everything else. Thank you, she said quietly. For the company. Thank you for the fire, I said. She nodded once and went to her room. I went back to the cot. I lay there a long time before I slept, listening to the storm and thinking about the way firelight had moved across her face, and about all the things a person can feel in a single evening that they have no name for and no business feeling. The second day of the storm was quieter, but colder. The wind had dropped some, but the temperature had fallen hard overnight, the kind of cold that settles in when the sky goes still and clear, and there's nothing left between you and whatever is up there in the dark beyond the stars. I woke to the sound of her moving in the kitchen, and when I came out, I found coffee on the stove and a pan of cornbread cooling on the counter, and Eliza standing at the frost-edged window, looking out at the white world. Any sign of letting up? I asked. Not today, she said. She turned from the window and handed me a cup. I checked on your horse this morning. He's fine. Ate everything I gave him. You went out in that? I bundled up. A slight shrug. The animals don't care about the weather. I drank the coffee and looked at her. This woman who rose before the cold was out of the house, who tended another man's horse without being asked, who had fed a stranger and sat with him by the fire half the night, and then gone back to her duties like it was all just part of the ordinary work of living. There was a kind of quiet heroism in it that I'd never had the words for before. We spent the day the way people spend days when the weather has made all decisions for them. While she mended harness leather at the table while I split the firewood stacked on the covered porch. There wasn't much left, and I wanted to make sure she had enough. Then I fixed a loose board on the barn door that had been letting in wind, and she brought me a tin of hot coffee and stood in the barn doorway to hand it to me, her breath fogging in the cold. "You didn't have to do any of this," she said, meaning the wood, the barn. "I know," I said. "I wanted to." She looked at me with an expression I'd seen the night before, that door moving in the breeze. Then she went back to the house. In the afternoon, she baked bread, because that is what frontier women do when they're anxious and the hours are long. I sat at the table and watched her work, and she talked, more than she had the previous night, easier now, not like something in her had decided I was safe to speak plainly to. She talked about the homestead, about the years of drought that had nearly broken them, about the child she had lost 2 winters prior, a boy, 3 days old. She said it quietly, without drama, the way a woman says the thing she has said to herself so many times that the saying of it no longer breaks her open. I didn't say I was sorry. The word always feels thin against losses like that. I said, "What were you going to name him?" She looked at me, surprised by the question. "Samuel," she said, "after my father." "That's a good name," I said. She nodded and went back to her bread, but after a moment, she said, quietly, without looking up, "Nobody ever asks that." We ate dinner at the table, and the meal had the feel of something more than just eating. That particular intimacy that comes from sharing food in a warm house when the world outside is frozen and dark. After dinner, she poured 2 small glasses of whiskey. Harlan kept a bottle for medicinal purposes, she said, with a slight ghost of a smile. And we sat by the fire again. She asked me if I'd ever wanted to stay somewhere. I said I'd tried, once, and it hadn't taken. She asked why, and I said because I think I always knew there was somewhere else I was supposed to be, and I just didn't know where. "Do you know now?" she asked. The fire between us, her amber eyes, the whiskey warm in my chest, the storm pressing against the walls of her husband's house. "No," I said, because that was the honest answer, and because the other answer was not one I had any right to give. Then she said, "My husband doesn't talk to me. Not the way you do. He's not a bad man. He works hard, he provides. But he thinks that's all a marriage is. He stopped seeing me a long time ago." She turned her glass in her hands. I forgot what it felt like to be seen. I didn't say anything. I just looked at her, really looked, and let her know I heard every word. The fire burned. The storm muttered at the walls, and the space between us, which had been slowly, inevitably narrowing all day, narrowed a little more. I don't know exactly when the line got crossed. I know there was a moment when she reached across the small space between us to set her glass on the stone hearth, and our hands were very close, and neither of us pulled back. I know there was another moment when she said something quietly, and I leaned in to hear her better. And when she turned her face toward mine, we were close enough that the light between us seemed to thicken. I know I should have stood up and gone to that back room. I know I didn't. What happened that night by the fire in Eliza Danner's house was not what some men might expect me to say happened. It was not reckless or wild or shameless. It was 2 people who had been alone in different ways for a long time, sitting very close together while the world outside was frozen and the fire burned low, and saying things to each other that they had never said to anyone. And eventually, when the night was very deep and the whiskey was gone and everything felt both impossible and inevitable, letting something quiet and real pass between them, or a hand held, a forehead rested against a shoulder, her voice barely above a whisper, saying something I won't put into words here, because some things belong only to the night they happened in. We didn't betray her husband the way the world would most quickly name betrayal. But we crossed a line. I knew it, and she knew it. Some lines don't need to be spelled out to be real. I went to the back room before the house got light. I lay on the cot and looked at the ceiling and felt the particular weight of a man who has done something he can't undo. Not because it was ugly, but because it was the opposite of ugly. And the world has no good place for things like that. She was already in the kitchen when I came out in the morning, and she was standing at the stove with her back to me, pouring water into a pot she didn't need to fill. And then she said it. "Don't tell my husband about last night." The words fell into the quiet kitchen like stones. Not cruel, not cold, just the necessary truth of things, spoken aloud so that we could both hear it and know what it meant and accept what it cost. I said, "You have my word." She didn't turn around. "The storm's broken," she said. "You should be able to ride out by mid-morning." And that was that. Not cold. She wasn't cold. She was just doing what women like her do, which is set the world back on its axis by sheer force of composure when it has tilted somewhere it shouldn't have gone. I saddled Hatch in the cold, white morning. The storm had passed in the night, leaving the world rearranged. The prairie a flat, blinding sheet of white. The sky above it the pale blue of winter glass. The air so still and clear it felt like something that had never been breathed before. The kind of morning that comes after a great violence and pretends to know nothing about it. She came out while I was tightening the cinch. She'd wrapped a heavy wool coat around her shoulders, and her auburn hair was braided again, neat and proper, and she was carrying something wrapped in a cloth. She handed it to me without ceremony. Cornbread, the bread from yesterday. Enough for the road. "The Casper Road will be passable by afternoon," she said. "Stay east of the ridge if you want to avoid the deep drifts." "I'll do that," I said. "Thank you, Eliza." She looked up at me, those amber eyes, clear in the cold morning light, holding everything and nothing. "Thank you, Cole," she said. I wanted to say more. I think she did too. But there are things that can only be said in the dark, by a fire, in the middle of a blizzard. Things that the ordinary daylight does not have room for, that would sound different and smaller and wrong out here in the white morning with the whole world watching. So neither of us said them. I mounted up. She stood in the snow of her own yard and watched me go. And when I reached the gate, I looked back once. She raised one hand. Not a wave exactly, more like an acknowledgement. I am here. You were here. This happened. I turned Hatch south and rode. I delivered the horses in Casper 2 days later and collected my pay. And I rode out the same afternoon, heading nowhere in particular. But I noticed that for the first time in a long while, I wasn't just riding away from a place. I was carrying something. Not guilt, or not only guilt. No, something more complicated. The way a storm leaves the air different after it moves through. I thought about what she'd said, that she'd stopped and sometimes wondered if she'd stopped too soon. I thought about Samuel, the name that nobody ever asked about. I thought about a woman standing at a frosted window, watching for a husband who wasn't coming, and choosing, just for one long cold night, to look at something else. I never went back to that part of Wyoming. Some things are meant to be whole and complete in themselves, not beginnings, not threads to be pulled, just moments that happened in the brief overlap where two solitudes met and recognized each other, and then moved on. I kept the promise I made. Harlan Danner never heard a word of it from me. And sometimes, on winter nights, when the sky turns gray in the northwest, I can still see the orange light of her window in the white wall of the storm. Still feel the warmth of that fire. Still hear her voice, barely above a whisper. saying the thing that belongs only to that night. A man carries certain things for the rest of his life, not as burdens, as proof that he was alive, that somewhere in all the drifting and the distance and the cold, something real found him for a little while and let him in out of the storm. I reckon that's worth a great deal. Before you go, if this story moved you, subscribe to the channel. We tell stories like this one every week, and we'd love to have you with us. Leave a comment and tell us, what city are you watching from? We'll leave you a heart on every single one. Until next time, ride safe and stay warm.